Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So as mentioned before, my name is James Chan, and I lead the global pre-sales organization at SmartRecruiters. And I'm so excited to have two guests with me today. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself, talk about who you are, what you do, and what company you work for?
Cheers, James. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. My name's Dave Hazlehurst, and I'm a partner and a co-owner of an employer brand agency based in the centre of the university that you all know as Liverpool, called PH Creative. And we basically work with global clients right across Europe, APAC and America on employer brand, experience and talent attraction.
Excellent. Thank you for joining, Dave. And maybe we can talk about some of the real football clubs afterwards when we're done. Sorry. Morgan, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and what company you work for?
You bet. Thanks, James. So Morgan Wilson, I work in the training organization at Expeditors. We are a Fortune 500 global logistics company headquartered in Seattle, but we have employees all over the world. And one unique thing about Expeditors is even though we're 18,000 employees, we don't have HR. So as a result, we also don't have really very many recruiters. And so ownership for our hiring system has fallen to training. So at any rate, that's where I spend a lot of my time is running our ATS and helping our thousands of hiring managers try and use it effectively without recruiters' help.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. So interestingly, I'm based in New York City, and I had the opportunity this weekend to actually go back to Broadway. And my family and I went to go see Hamilton. And there's this song, I think, somewhere in like the early stages of the show. And there's this key verse, I think it was in a song called Yorktown. And they talk about this thing about the world turning upside down. And so at the risk of sounding obvious, I think we can all say the world really has turned upside down in the past 2 years, right? And one of the key things that I see in our industry is that over the past 2 years, the war for talent has really accelerated. And I think in today's world, right, I think qualified candidates have a lot of different options. So for us to really get good candidates, we really need to focus on a great candidate experience, all the way from sourcing to hiring and all that kind of stuff. And then when I think about, well, how do we build a great candidate experience? I kind of look at it from three perspectives. It's really the people, the process, and the technology. And when I talk about people, I'm talking about, do folks really understand what they're responsible for and what their desired behavior should be? From a process perspective, have we designed the optimal processes, as well as the technology, right? Is it configured to drive those processes and the behavior that we want? So I think for our conversation today, I would love to kind of get your thoughts and dig more into those different areas, right? And hopefully that you can provide some real world examples that our audience can bring back to their companies as they think about their own hiring strategy. So if it's okay, let's get started. So Dave, I would love to kind of get your thoughts, right? You work with a lot of different customers. What challenges have you really seen in the current candidate experience?
Yeah, so the world has gone upside down. It can become quite complex, I think. I think there's a couple of things going on right now that are really interesting when it comes to the candidate experience. Great talent has choice. Okay, so clearly, the experience that you create definitely is a representation of who you are as a brand, basically, in an organization. And a lot of the challenges are how do you show up? Can they find out what they're looking for? How easy is it to find this information? What do you know about the candidates? How are they being communicated to? What's the messaging like? And there's loads of components when we think about what makes a great candidate experience. And a couple of things we speak to our clients about a lot is you can't make assumptions. We do a lot of what we call experience by design. Okay, and what we need to understand, and you've touched on some of the key components there. If you think about from brand awareness through to application, through to the process that a candidate goes through, to the hiring manager, to pass or fail, if you like. And you think about the moments and the moments between the moments, there are lots of things that can happen in that journey that somebody has with you. And even just at the beginning, candidates will research and touch about 13 to 14 sources of information before they even click apply. And then when they click apply, what's that experience look and feel like? And then what happens next? What happens next? And I think you're right, you've got the brand awareness, you've got what do people feel, their emotions as they go through the process. What are they thinking? What questions are on their minds, and can they get answers to them? How easy is it for them to do that? And then how many people interact? And then a key point is the technology that enables those things to happen. And all of those things are really important. But what we're seeing more than anything at the moment is ease and convenience for candidates is a big thing. And it's not just easy, it's convenience. Right time, right place, make it easy for me. And it's going a bit beyond the candidate experience, because the onboarding part as well is hugely important. And in a remote world, that fires up lots of different questions that we need to also think about, and what talent wants. So what talent wants is changing as well. But I think it is a war for talent, and experiences are the representation of who you are and the characteristics of who you are. And I think there's a lot of employers thinking they know what talent wants, but it's their thoughts not going out and finding out, and there's a mismatch going on, definitely. And I think there's some of the things that we're definitely seeing with candidates at the moment, and talent. And we're actually fighting for their time and attention. The talent's won the war for talent, but how do we get their attention? How do we engage? How do we get their attention and time?
Yeah, and it almost feels like we almost have to be marketers now, right? Where we're kind of, they're doing their research about us as an organization, then they're going to interact with us. And when they interact with us, they want to be able to kind of get a good feel for who we really are and provide that authentic voice and brand out there. So, I know you've kind of helped a lot of companies with creating that authentic voice and brand. So if you had to kind of give us some tips and tricks in terms of what should we focus on in kind of building that authentic voice and brand, what would that be?
Yeah, I think so. We've done a lot of work around this concept of give and get. So what does somebody have to give, but what do they get in return? And traditionally, an employer brand and the messaging is that you're trying to forge your reputation in the marketplace that you want to become famous for. You need to set those expectations for that reputation with great communication, and then the experiences need to match that. Now, what's happened in the past is an employer brand sells all the good stuff, but it doesn't sell the truth. And actually then you get a mismatch, and the candidate experience gets bad because the candidate gets the job, arrives and goes, this wasn't what I was expecting. This doesn't feel like what I thought it was going to be like. And so your employer brand and your messaging, so it's who you are, how you want to talk about yourself, and the harsh realities to help talent get themselves out and get themselves in and qualify themselves almost. Those things need to be true. And to find that out, that's about really listening. It's not about finding the right answers. It's about asking the right questions to give you the ingredients to give you the right answers. And you've got to tune in and dial up certain parts of your message and marketing based on who the talent is. So somebody who might be driving a vehicle is completely different to, say, someone in software engineering or marketing or HR. And what matters to them is different to what matters to those people over there. And so your employer brand needs to be flexible, to be true to who you are and talk about the harsh realities and the good stuff. But it also then needs to show up in the right places and give the right information, authentic. Let's face it, we sense when things aren't true more than ever. There's a thing called the critical faculty in how our minds work, that we sense that doesn't feel right. And so it's really important that it is authentic and it's not all glossy and it's not all showy and rainbows and everything else. Talent wants to know what it's really like. This is talent going for a job and making a choice. Great talent. It's life-changing choices that they're making. It's real big decisions they're making. You spend more time in your work than probably with your family. Well, I don't know about COVID, how that impacts it, but you spend a lot of time in your job, don't you? And you can't exactly go and try it on before you buy it. So talent wants to know. They want to know, and they want to know the truth. And I think that's where a lot of companies, we're learning now. We're getting better at this, in the format, the way that we do it and how we engage through different channels, but, it's not just about attracting talent for today. It's also making friends before you need them. How do you build? And I don't like the word talent pipelines because you put people in the pipeline. We put go straight. I don't like talent pools because they drown if you put people in a pool. They're communities of people, and in the communities we go to give before we get. And I think we've got to think about how we engage earlier.
Yeah, and I love the concept of communities, right? Because I think one of the things we find now, especially with talent, is that they have to believe in the mission. And this community of folks that have relatively same beliefs and kind of nurturing that and that friendship, right, I think is so key. And I think the other thing that we kind of touched on earlier too was around, beyond building the brand, we also have to have the underlying technology as well.
Yeah.
So Morgan, I would kind of love to kind of get your perspective in terms of what the high-level hiring process looks like at Expeditors. And then what kind of key capabilities would you say empowers your hiring managers to be efficient in their hiring? Because I think you mentioned like you don't have a recruiting team, right? All your hiring managers do the hiring. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's a tough challenge, especially right now. Or, in logistics, everybody knows what's going on with supply chains and the flow of freight, and how backlogged it is. I heard a statistic a couple of days ago that there's enough freight sitting in the port of Los Angeles to keep our Expeditors employees busy through April. And so our operations people, our branches are just crushed with business and work. And so then to think that the hiring manager can do everything they need to bring people on as we want to grow or replace people, it's super daunting. And so it's very difficult. And so one of the ways, we're trying to at least lift some of that challenge is to leverage some of the technology. And smart recruiters for us has always been a low learning curve, and that's what we need. We need a hiring manager that maybe hasn't hired for 6 months to get into the system and say, this is pretty easy, and we have some guidance. And there's another feature we're using, an AI feature called Smart Assistant, and that overlays all the candidates with the job and looks at experience and education, and it's kind of a quick way for the hiring manager to take those applicants and sort them and more quickly move through the process of finding the best fit people. But it's very difficult.
Yeah, and how many hiring managers do y'all have globally?
I mean, with 18,000 employees, we have 3,500, 4,000 different people that are actually hiring in that role of hiring around the world.
Got it. And Morgan, if it's okay, I have a question that kind of came in that might be up in your area. They said, so they're looking for technology as well. And it seems like you kind of touched upon some of the technology that you all use. Like, so, if you had to give advice for someone that's looking for talent acquisition technology, like what should they be really looking for? What are the key capabilities?
Well, I mean, for us, without recruiters, I think that's the key, right? So other companies, it's going to be different. If you have recruiters, they know what they're looking for. They can handle a more complex, powerful system. For us, it can't do everything because, our hiring managers have to get in there and use the technology that's kind of at their fingertips, let's say. So that learning curve is key. But the other huge thing is candidate, and Dave was talking about candidate experience is so crucial, and it has to be a low barrier to entry. And so, the jobs have to be out there, available in the right places, but as candidates come across them, it can't be difficult to actually apply. And so that to me is another, very key factor. But then, different to me, I mean, honestly, the thing about smart recruiters, and the CEO, Jerome, is he's a visionary in this space, and it's moving so fast We've been with Smart Recruiters for 7 years, but it's moved so fast over that time, and it continues to evolve so fast that you have to be with a partner that evolves and continues to, meet those candidates where they want to find jobs and how they want to be courted and that type of thing. And so anyway, I think you got to go with some technology that continues to stay current.
Got it. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just listening to that, what I find fascinating, I mean, when we talk about candidate experience, it's quite interesting just what Morgan's talking about there. We often talk about there's a love triangle in candidate experience, which is the candidate, the recruiter, and the hiring manager. Now, when we map out, so we build these maps basically of a candidate experience. We've just done a big global piece of work for AstraZeneca, for example, about the candidate experience right across the world and inconsistently, all this kind of stuff. But there's always this love triangle, okay? And what happens is the more actors or people that are involved at any certain stage of the candidate experience, it creates complexity. And where there's complexity, the ease and the emotional roller coaster that a candidate goes on starts to go down. And what's interesting is you took one of them out, which is fair play to you. I mean, it's a brave decision. Like, it's brave. And what's interesting is technology is an enabler there. And what I would say to anybody thinking about technology, it's not the tools, it's how you use them. And I think you need to, yes, an ATS traditionally is seen as it's almost like a business process tool it used to be seen as. And since about 2014, 2015, people started going, hold on a second, candidates, we need to treat them like we should customers, and what does that mean, and blah, blah, blah. And, and I'm not just saying this, I mean, we work with multiple ATSs, but I will definitely say this, Smart Recruiters is right up there in being focused on a great experience, not just for candidates, but for the client as well, so the client user as well, because it's not just the candidates using it. It's, in your case, it's the hiring manager. Now, this model you're using, Morgan, wouldn't work if it wasn't easy for the hiring manager, because it just wouldn't work. And so I find it fascinating because when at the first time I'd kind of seen it like this, I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because when it's simple and clever, not brilliant and complex, that's where we want to be. Simple and clever, not brilliant. And I think, you're onto something there, especially in terms of speed. So when there's great talent and talent has choice, give them great experience, but get to the offer faster. And you're going to have more choice as an employer. So I just think it's quite interesting, the fact that you kind of said, okay, let's take something out there, but how can technology enable that to happen?
Yeah, and what struck me as really interesting, Morgan, as we kind of talked through some of this, is that you kind of removed the friction out of that process, right? So it seemed like it was real easy for your hiring managers to kind of find the right folks and then kind of give them a great experience in terms of moving through the system quickly to kind of get to offer as well. So it kind of removes a lot of the friction in the system.
Yeah, and I think it's not a simple proposition. You're right. It does remove that third player, but then what we end up with is hiring managers that understand the challenge and they're up for it. They can have great success. Other ones, they may not provide a great candidate experience because they don't put enough time into the process. So the consistency is very difficult without some oversight.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we find the hiring manager often there's a mindset shift needed, and and something depend on the size of the organization. I mean, we've got a whole internal campaign happening with one of our clients now to help that shift with the support and the training. One of the simple things we say to them is, don't call it recruitment process, call it recruitment experience, and suddenly it makes you think of it differently. It's not a process, it's not a mechanical thing, it's an experience. And then the other thing that we encourage them to do is go, when was the last time you went and looked for a job that you're currently advertising and walked in their shoes, both digitally, and see how that feels, and they're just some of the things, but it often is a bit of a mindset shift.
Yeah, and I love that suggestion as an experiment, right? Like walk in their shoes to kind of see what that experience feels like.
Yeah.
And if you were a candidate, would you want to work for the company you currently work for if you had that same experience? I
Yeah.
think that's a great suggestion. Um, and Dave, just want to kind of circle back on one thing you mentioned earlier on in our discussion. You talked about the onboarding
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you've kind of seen in terms of keeping the promise of the brand, even all the
Yeah.
way through like onboarding?
Yeah. It's super hot now onboarding because obviously companies are still recalibrating. They're still a bit, nobody really knows. We're never ever going to go back to work like we were. I don't think. I think that's gone. I think that's well gone. And so what's become really important to talent around, we talk about these things called the 3 Cs, which are culture, career catalyst, and citizenship. So where are you as an employer in all of that? All right. But talent, there's a brilliant piece of research came out by McKinsey a couple of weeks ago called The Great Attraction to the Great Attrition.
Mhm.
Okay. And it talks about what employers think talent wants versus what talent wants. And talent wants now more than ever before in the top left quadrant, sense of belonging, sense of community, and feeling valued by my peers, not necessarily the company, but my peers. Okay. So what that means is then, as part of onboarding, how do we enable that to happen in a remote world or, wherever it might be? You've got to zoom in and think about, like, from the moment you tell them and they get the offer, which is a potential Disney moment, but we probably don't leverage that enough as it is, to, they get their kit or they get the uniform or whatever it might be. But one of the things that we're finding is don't just onboard the employee, onboard the family, onboard the environment they work in. They're digitally domestic now. The people they work and live with, they work and live with them in the same place. They help your employees feel good about themselves or bad about themselves. So so we've got like make it experiential. So we've got some clients where we've created culture books that are games that you get and you play with your family to experience the brand as part of your onboarding, but you do it with your family. That then drives advocacy. We get them to share it socially. It creates a bit of internal and external noise. So just think about how you move the experience into onboarding. It doesn't have to be, there's all the hygiene things that people have to do. But what are some of the moments that you can create that create a bit of sense of experience for the household? But then how do you drive connectivity within their peer group? It's really, really easy to create a network when you're in an office. When you're not, how do you enable that? We're actually just mapping out, interestingly enough, for a big global delivery company, the driver experience at the moment. And all these drivers are self-employed, but they want to make them feel much more of a community. That's something we're working on, and that comes by understanding first.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that we're thinking about the experience beyond just the checkbox of things that they need to kind of take operationally and also expanding it out to the whole family, right? Because nowadays, especially in this remote world, we're all kind of commingled. Our personal lives, work lives, it's all one thing. So that's so important.
Yeah.
There's a couple of minutes left. There were a couple more questions that came in that I would kind of love to kind of get y'all's thoughts on. One of them was, what's the right mix of internal recruiters versus the use of external search firms and agencies? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll comment on that. So we're headquartered in Seattle, which is a tech hub, and we're we have about 800 technical people. We build our own systems, and so there are definitely hard to fill jobs that we cannot fill. We cannot fill without the support of an agency. And so we're selective where we spend money, but at times it's necessary.
Interesting question. That I think I don't think it's as linear. I don't think it's a linear answer either. I think if I look at, we work with a lot of in-house teams, right? 5 years ago, in-house recruiters. We've got clients now who have almost their own employer brand agency in their team, and they talk about having a CRM that basically each CRM is a target talent audience. They have a campaign manager and a copywriter, and there's always on activity from a content point of view. And one of the first sourcing places is straight into that campaign, so it's interesting. We've got one client, actually, Global Bank. They've got in their own candidate and talent attraction team, they've got their own web designer, they've got their own paid media programmatics person, they've got 6 copywriters, and they're, we've worked with them on that change over time. It's really interesting. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying recruiters are going anywhere, by the way. I'm just saying it's interesting way some people are starting to think about this, and being a bit progressive, but so for example, the world that Morgan's in is different to the world probably of, getting systems architects and software engineers for Google or what, they're different. The needs and the way you go about it and engage them are different. I know we talked about the war for talent, and there's a chap there, and culture's right, strategy's right, and actually companies don't invest enough in strategy when it comes to talent. They just don't do it, but they're going to have to, because talent's the competitive advantage, and talent has too much choice now. And it is bonkers at the moment.
Yeah.
However, what I would say is the strategy for logistics is different to the strategy for software engineers. To that, and so we're going to be moving along at a pace where we've got to be really smart about strategies, about sacrifice as much. You've got to think about where are we going. And it's really interesting. I find it fascinating listening to different clients' business challenges and the problems that they face and the solutions that they come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, just this mindset shift, almost like we have to think like marketers, right? So depending on the experience, depending on the needs, we're going to actually introduce different tactics, different channels to make sure we're hitting the right audience with the right message. I would personally love to talk to you both a lot more, and maybe we can have a follow-up. But I think one of the things here is I wanted to kind of thank you both for joining me today. And to wrap things up, I think if the audience is interested in learning more about some of the best practices you've heard today, just head on over to hiringsuccess.com. There you're going to find some really cool practical step-by-step guides on what hiring success means, some of the tactics and mindset shifts in terms of strategy and culture that we've kind of talked about here that you can kind of bring into your organization. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. Cheers.